one progenitor named Rochana. So through that progenitor, they produced one child named Twashta. And Twashta, later on, he has two sons named Sanivesh and Vishwarupa. So Vishwarupa becomes the priest for the Devatas after they're rejected by their guru. So that summarizes chapter 6. So chapter 7 begins with a question. Why did the priests of the Devatas, his name was Bhrigu Muni, why did they reject the Devatas? So Shrikadeva Goswami becomes interested in that. Why would the Bhrigu reject the Devatas? And therefore the Devatas were forced to accept Vishwarupa as the priest. And Vishwarupa's mother, she's from a lineage of Daityas. Daityas means the demon species. So she's from, her family lineage is from that side. So Vishwarupa had a combination of demon, you can say demon blood and Devata blood. So why did the Devata's priest, Bhrigu Muni, reject them? And they were forced to accept shelter of this priest. Shrikadeva Goswami becomes interested in that. And that springs board to chapter 7, which is very interesting. And this is going to get into the whole Vitrasura Leela that's coming up now. So we're gonna read the first passage. This is up to verse 14. Starting with the first verse. I'm not looking at all the Sanskrit stuff because it's very straightforward. So Prabhupada's purports doesn't give purports. So we're looking at chapter 7, verse 1, starting. So verse 1 says this: Maharaj Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva Goswami, "O great sage, why did the spiritual master of the demigods, Brihaspati," oops, I said Bhrigu Muni, Brihaspati, "reject the demigods who were his own disciples? What offense did the demigods commit against their spiritual master? Please describe to me this incident." Okay, next verse. So long set of verses here. Shukadeva Goswami said, "Once, O king, once upon a time, the king of heaven, Indra, being extremely proud because of his great opulence of the three worlds, transgressed the law of Vedic etiquette. Seated on his throne, he was surrounded by the Maruts, Vasus, Rudras, Adityas, Ribus, Vishwadevas, Sadyas, Ashwini Kumaras, Siddhas, Chaturnas, and Gandharvas, and by great saintly persons. Also surrounding him were the Vidyadharas, Apsaras, Kinnaras, Patagas, birds, and Udagas, snakes. All of them were offering Indra their respects and services. And the Apsaras and Gandharvas were dancing and singing with very sweet musical instruments. Over Indra's head was a white umbrella that is often used to, when you're taking God on procession, use a white umbrella as a sign of opulence. As effulgent as a full moon, fanned by yak-tail whisk and served with all the paraphernalia of a great king, Indra was sitting with his wife, Shachi Devi, who occupied half the throne. When the great sage Brihaspati appeared in that assembly, Brihaspati, the best of sages, was the spiritual master of Indra and the demigods, and was respected by the demigods and demons alike. Nevertheless, although Indra saw his spiritual master before him, he did not rise from his own seat or offer a seat to his spiritual master, nor did Indra offer him a respectful welcome. Indra did nothing to show him respect. So in the very beginning of the verse, the issue is brought up immediately. The word used is Tribhuvana Aishwarya, Madha. So the word Madha means madness. And it usually is a word that is also used to refer to pride. The madness that comes from pride. And there are 4 types of madhas are there, right? Queen Kunti says in her prayers to Krishna, Janmaishwaya Shutashri Bir Edamana Madhapuma. Na eva aritu abidatum vai twama kinchana gocha. My famous prayers there. That those who have aristocratic birth or wealth or beauty or knowledge, and edamana madhapuma, this means that causes the expansion of pride. Mada means madness, and edamana means expanding. So anyone who gets this position in this world, their pride expands. Na eva aritu abidatumba. and they're not able to feelingly call out to the Supreme Lord. They may also be devotees, but they're not be able to call out to Supreme Lord with the feeling, because they feel, I have my wealth, I have my aristocratic birth, I have my beauty. So they feel that they have shelter in these things. So what is the need for God's shelter? So they give lip service to God also, but their heart is settled in the comfort of their opulences because of pride. Pride promotes the identification with matter. So if you feel sheltered in matter, how you will take shelter of the Lord? Just like I always tell this story there, Sri Bhakti Siddhanta stories there. One boy bought some popcorn. I don't know how in Srila Bhakti Siddhanta stories, the popcorn comes up several times. They had popcorn that time also. Anyway, so one boy bought some popcorn and he wanted to take it to some girl. It is in Vrindavan. As he was crossing the Jamuna River, some strong gush of wind came and the wind blew the popcorn out of his hand. So saying that the popcorn is anyway lost, he said, Govindaya Namaha. You know, Govinda, I'm offering this to you. But that is not what the real feeling, because the popcorn was intended for the girlfriend. But since anyway, I'm losing the popcorn now, Govindaya Namaha, this popcorn is for you. There's no feeling there. So if one is made mad by pride, their identification with the psychophysical apparatus is augmented. Then how they will be able to feel shelter in the Supreme Lord, very difficult. So here, Tribhuvana Aishwarya Madha, he has the opulence of the three worlds, so he's gone mad. And what does that mad cause him to do? Ulangita Satpata. Ulangita means it's translated here, he transgressed the Satpata. Satpata means the path of truth, or the path of cultured people in Vedic culture, called Satpata, which means, hey, my guru is here, I should offer him respect. So it's a very simple aspect of the Satpata. So he transgressed that Satpata due to the Madha that comes from Tribhuvana Aishwarya. So this problem will be repeated several times in the next several verses. The saying here is that basically Indra is like receiving an Oscar. So all the universal elites, they're all there and they're all glorifying him. He's receiving, nice praise. He's very happy. And his guru arrives in the same Brihaspati. He sees him also, but he does not rise to honor him. He doesn't show him any words of respect. The statement, he does not rise, is mentioned twice in the Sanskrit. So a commentary points out this is to show that this was the defect, that he was not able to honor his guru because he was made blind by the pride. There's one nice verse there. I didn't pick it up, but now I'm remembering it. It comes in the 4th canto when Shiva is trying to explain to Sati why she shouldn't go to the party of her father, Daksha also here. And then he says that he mentions qualities of the saintly persons. He says these qualities such as knowledge and austerity, etc. He mentions 6 of them. Let me see if I can find that verse really quick. He says these qualities of the saintly persons, they have a reverse effect in those who are asat. So when you are situated in truth, then you have knowledge and you have austerity, it increases your beauty. But if you are a sat person, you are on the path of a sat, you are called as asatama. So these opulences cause a reverse effect in you. So you have knowledge, you have austerity, you become immediately proud, and you assume the nature of a demon, basically. We'll see Indra say this thing. So what is the main defect of this reversal? So Shiva mentions this. Let me see if I can find it really quick. I'm pretty sure it's 4.2.17. I don't know why I didn't think of this verse earlier, because I always like to quote this verse. Maybe it's 4.3. Yeah, talks between. Give me a second. Let's see if my memory. Yeah, okay, 4.3.17. So vidya, tapa, vitta, vapu, bhayukulai. Vidya means knowledge. Tapa means austerity. Vitta means wealth. Vapu, the beauty. Youth. Kulai means a good family background. So satam, gunai, shadbir, these 6 qualities are qualities of the sat, like pious qualities, basically. Asatama itarai, they have a reverse effect in the asatama people. And what is the main problem with that? So here the verse mentions very nicely. Shmrito hatayam britamanu dudrisha. Shmrito hatayam means your good sense becomes lost. you lose your good sense. Britamanu dudrisha, and you become blind due to the pride. Okay, what's wrong with that? Stabdad na pashanti hitama bhuyasham. And because of blindness due to pride, you're not able to see the greatness of great souls. Because you're proud. You don't see any greatness anywhere but in yourself. So now you're in trouble. So many stories like this come in Bhagavatam, like Sutta Goswami. So Sutta Goswami, who's speaking Bhagavatam, his name is Ugrashrava Sutta, right? Ugrashrava Sutta means sharp ears, because he heard very nicely from Shukadeva Goswami. Now he's speaking Bhagavatam. So his father's name was Ramaharshana Sutta. So Ramaharshana Sutta is there giving Srimad Bhagavatam, not Bhagavatam class, he's speaking the Puranas. So Puranas deal with a lot of material subject matters, and the sages themselves were interested in those things. So he's giving class on Puranas. So Balaram goes on pilgrimage. No, Balaram is traveling, and he enters into the space where the Puranas are being spoken by Ramaharshana Sutta. So all the sages, they rose to honor Balaram. So Ramaharshana Sutta, why I should stand? I'm giving class. I have to stand. So, this is part of the principle. I'm giving class. I should be honored. So Balaram took issue with that because this is setting a bad precedent for the future. So he took one kusha grass there, and he just hit it against his head, and he died. He killed him right on the spot. So all the sages were like, oh, like alas. We just gave him benediction that he will live long life. And you already killed him just after we've given the benediction. So Balaram said, okay, I'll bring him back to life. They said, no, you are Bhagavan. So we do not want to transgress your desire, but still somehow our blessing should also come true. So the son is considered non-different from the father. So they transfer the blessing to Sutta Goswami. And he becomes a speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam to the sages. A very nice story. So many stories like this of people getting blinded by their opulences, either of wealth or knowledge, as it were. And Britamana, they become blind, they can't see the greatness of great souls. And they make some mistake, they get into trouble. Okay. So this problem is here for Indra also. Tribhuvana Aishwarya, Madhola Gita Satpata. So he doesn't want to stand for the Guru. So what is the result? Next verse. So it says here, Brihaspati knew everything that would happen in the future. So in the verse here, he's called as Kavi. Kavi means poet. Kavi also is a word that is used to refer to the most advanced souls in the culture. Like Lord Brahma, he's also called as Kavi, right? Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye, the first Kavi. Kavi word refers to highly enlightened souls in the culture. They're called as Kavis, which literally means poet. So here, because he is Kavi, he knew everything that was about to happen to Indra. Seeing Indra's transgression of etiquette, he completely understood that Indra was puffed up by his material opulence. So Vidwan Srimada Vikriya. Vidwan means he knew that this person is suffering from Sri Madha. So Sri is taken here as the wealth or opulence, Aishwarya. So he's suffering from the madness of Sri. Although able to curse Indra, so he's called here as Prabhu, master, because he could also curse him. This time, you'll see many times in the Shastra also that these sages curse like anything. It's like a little bit dangerous a little bit. You make a small little mistake, I curse you. But he could curse, but he didn't curse. So he's called here as Prabhu because he could curse, but he didn't curse. What did he do? Although able to curse, he did not do so. Instead, he left the assembly and in silence returned to his home. Ayayo swagraham tushna. So sometimes the silence is worse, and the anger of a sadhu is much more preferred than the silence of a sadhu. Silence of a sadhu means basically no connection to grace, whereas their anger is still a connection to grace. Just like Narada Muni, when I'll bring this up also, Narada Muni, when he cursed the Nalakuvera Manigriva, so he also mentions there, I was going to bring it up a little bit later, I'll bring it up now. So Nalakuvera Manigriva, they were the associates of, they were the sons of Kuvera. who was the treasurer of the Devatas. So they had a lot of opulence too. So they one time partying in the Mandakini Ganga, naked with some ladies. Ooh, they had drank the Varuni and they're partying. And Narada Muni shows up, and the ladies immediately felt modest. They covered up. Oh my God, we don't want to be cursed. Again, because cursing seems like a common cultural thing. So they covered over immediately. But Nalakuvara Managriva, they were so intoxicated, they didn't cover over. So Narada Muni chastised them. First, it explains his thinking process. And in his thinking process, he said, this is due to the madness of Sri. So we mentioned 4 types of madness. Madness coming from aristocratic birth, they had that also. Madness coming from wealth, they had that also. Madness coming from beauty, they had that also. And madness coming from the high knowledge, they had that also. But of these 4, Narada Muni says the madness that comes from Aishwarya is the most contaminating. Because you can be beautiful and poor, but if you're ugly and rich, you can get whatever you want. You can buy intelligence. You don't even have to be smart. You can buy the intelligence. You can buy the beauty, everything you can do with the money. And our very fake culture, social media culture, a lot of the women that are on social media, they have very unrealistic beauty standards. And a lot of them who have the money, they use their money to buy that beauty, like quite literally, to put the implants, to have their face shaped in a particular way and everything. Even that's not good enough. They also use the filters. You were showing me also. So of all the opulences, the wealth is most contaminating. Narada Muni was thinking like this. And he says the wealth causes people's hearts to become hard. So they become interested only in exploitation because their wealth allows them to do that. This is the dangers of wealth. And this is why in Krishna consciousness, we're about to see this. Wealth is usually considered as an issue, a problem for the sadhaka also. So anyway, Narada Muni was thinking like this. And so he cursed them. But that curse was a blessing on them. That was kripa, actually. So more dangerous than the curse of a sadhu is the silence of a sadhu. But we actually prefer more chastisement than silence. Silence means you're in real trouble. Silence means you're in real trouble. So he could curse also, but he didn't curse. He just left in silence. And so Indra did realize this, oh, I'm in trouble. So the next verse is coming. Taryeva pratibhudyendro guru halinam atmana. So Indra, the king of heaven, could immediately understand his mistake. Pratibhudya. Immediately he realized, oh, my intelligence I made a mistake. Realizing he had disrespected his Guru Helanam, his spiritual master, he condemned himself in the presence of all the members of the assembly. So this is just a sidebar, but this is Will Smith's mistake. Okay? He made slap to the Chris Rock, right? Then a few minutes later, he won an Oscar. So he came on the stage and he made speech, but he didn't condemn himself. He glorified himself. It was a little bit of a blunder. So now he's having some difficulties now in career rise. He made a little bit of a blunder there. Here, Indra doesn't glorify himself. I made a mistake. So he, in front of the whole assembly, he speaks. So what does he speak here? So his words are very instructive for us. Aho bhatta mayasa dukritam vaidhabra bhutina. Jnana maya aishwarya matena guru sadasi katkrita. Alas, alas, what a regrettable deed I have committed because of my lack of intelligence and my pride and my material opulence. I failed to show respect to my spiritual master when he entered this assembly, and thus I have insulted him. So he says a whole, astonishment. Asadu kritam, maya asadu kritam. I have done asadu kritam. I've done a very bad thing here. Kritam means an action. So asadu, he didn't do good. Sadhu means like good, actually. It doesn't mean like good. Like you say sadhu, it means like it is good, it is good. So asadu kritam, I've done a very bad thing here. Why you have done a bad thing? Well, 2 reasons are given here. Dabra budina, my intelligence was contaminated. The first part, there's a reason why I did something foolish. Because the intelligence was compromised. Well, why your intelligence was compromised? My Aishwarya Matena, due to the madness of Aishwarya. So intelligence is required for the function of the intellect is discernment. Intelligence is what allows a human being to live skillfully in the material world. Otherwise, you live like an animal, just following whatever the dictates of the senses tell you. So intelligence allows you to discern and live with skill in this world, navigate out of the difficulties. So if your intelligence becomes compromised, you're in trouble, right? What is Krishna saying? Bhagavad Gita, what is that? Buddhir nashat pranashyati. With the instruction of intelligence, you perish, right? How does that verse start? Dayato vishayam pung sangase shubhajayate sangat sanjayate kama krodha vijaya. You know this verse. They're very famous verses. From contemplating, if you don't want to meditate on Krishna, then you'll meditate on the sense objects. Natural. Even during japa. Dayato vishayam pung sang. Then you become attached to the sense objects. Then you become thirsty for the sense objects. And then when your thirsts are frustrated, you become angry. Then from angry, krodha, bhavati, samoha, you become samoha. So the word samoha means you start to lose the ability to discern what is good and what is bad. This is called bewilderment. You don't know what is the right thing to do. Then from the samoha, you lose memory. Smriti bhramsha. Your memory becomes lost. What is a memory for a devotee? I'm trying to be a devotee. I'm trying to be spiritual. I'm trying to conduct myself according to proper rules and regulations for human life and all that. Your memory becomes lost. And when your memory is lost, your intelligence can't function. And when the intelligence is lost, you perish. So here he's saying my intelligence got destroyed by the Aishwarya. And therefore I've done this asadukritam in the form of insulting my guru. So here, wealth is considered as a problem to our faculty of discernment. We're going to see Prabhupada's purport briefly in the next verse, how this is played out. Prabhupada gives a very nice statement here. So then he says, Ko gritya pandito lakshmin. Who is that pandit that would accept wealth? Who is that learned person who would accept this wealth? Tri pishtapa patir api. Even though I am the Pati, like the Lord of the three worlds. So I'm having a lot of wealth. Through that wealth, yaham asuram bhavam. Through that wealth, I have become an asura. Asuram bhavam. Asura means I have accepted the bhava, the spirit of asura, through that wealth. So who is that learned person who would accept this wealth? Nito adyavi buddheshwara. Even though I'm the Lord of the devatas, the demigods, those who are situated in goodness, through this wealth, I've become an asura. My consciousness has become asura bhava. Prabhupada's purport, I'm just going to read a little part of it, just a small part. But I feel like Prabhupada's purport has become increasingly relevant. You know, someone asked me this question on the social media, that do you think Prabhupada's books are relevant today in 2022? Or this was 2021, that asked me this question. And I said, I think Prabhupada's books have become more relevant as the times go, because all the things Prabhupada was talking about his books in his time seemed a little bit dramatic. You know, education is slaughterhouse, and now everyone's like, yeah. Now they're like, yeah. And before, if you would have called anyone in the culture a demon, everyone would be like, oh, why are you using that word? So now you can say this one's a demon, that one's a demon. Like people are like, yeah, they believe it. All my Prabhupada's books have become more relevant as, you know, they're, as they say in the States, this is not necessarily an appropriate devotional analogy, but Prabhupada's books are aging like fine wine. They have some statement like that. They're becoming more and more. Now you can just give someone some Prabhupada book, they'll read it and be like, yeah, Prabhupada's got a point. So Prabhupada writes this thing here, very relevant thing here. He says, yeah. Look at this. This is a very interesting statement. According to the laws of nature, when one is extremely opulent, one becomes degraded. That statement always freaked me out when I first read this as a new devotee. According to the laws of nature. There's like the law of nature, like if I throw this off the top of the table, because of the law of nature, it must fall down because of the density of the object, right? There's the law of nature. So Prabhupada was saying, according to the laws of nature, when one is extremely opulent, one becomes degraded. That's interesting. And this is true both individually and collectively. The demigods are situated in the mode of goodness, but sometimes, even when one is situated in such an exalted position as King Indra, the king of all the demigods, falls down because of material opulence. We're now actually seeing this in America. Now, this sentence is even more relevant now than when Prabhupada wrote it. The entire American nation has tried to advance in material opulence without striving to produce ideal human beings. The result is that Americans are now regretting the wholesale criminality of American society and are wondering how America has become so lawless and unmanageable. This is like more true now than ever before, like especially the unmanageable part. I mean, when I'm in New York City, I'm like, this is so unmanageable. You know, maintaining even the sanity. As stated in the Bhagavatam, that Tevi du Svartagatemi Vishnu. Persons who are unenlightened do not know the aim of life, which is to return home back to Godhead. Therefore, both individually and collectively, they try to enjoy so-called material comforts and they become addicted to wine and women. The men produced in such a society are less than fourth class. They are unwanted. They are the unwanted population, known as Varna Sankara. An increase of Varna Sankara population creates a hellish society. This is the society in which Americans now find themselves. So this is Prabhupada's explanation of the phrase here, Yayaham Asuram Bhavam, that through the wealth, you embrace the mentality of a demon. So a demon is one who is prepared, this is a statement from the 10th canto, an asura is one who is prepared to do anything for their own enjoyment. They can kill family members also for their own enjoyment. So the wealth somehow, according to Prabhupada's purport at least, it's the law of nature that this asura bhavam rises up if you have too much opulence. And so Indra's statement is itself the evidence for this, the pramana in this particular statement. In another verse in the Bhagavatam, this is coming in the 11th canto, Navayogindras are preaching to King Nimi. So Nimi asked one question, how to come out of Maya? So first, the Navayogindra give a summary that what it means to be a Maya. And in their summary of what it means to be a Maya, one of the things they mentioned is that wealth causes death of the soul. How does wealth cause death of the soul? Of course, the soul cannot die also. It is imperishable. So what is the meaning of the wealth causing death of the soul? I don't have an answer here, but a quick meditation on it was that the idea here is that wealth produces the pride, and pride will encourage the identification with the body. The body is itself dead. The soul is life, and the body is death, in a like very literal sense, especially if not used for promoting life. So that means our whole life, the soul who is life, the whole life becomes preoccupied with maintaining death, a dead body. And so identification with the body is death of the soul. And the life of the soul begins with the cutting of that identification with the body. That's why the gopis, they say this thing, Tava katamritam tapta jivana, right? The kata of Krishna is nectar, which is giving the life to the souls who are afflicted by samsara, tapta jivana. How is it giving them life? Because it's severing their identification with death, which is promoted by pride. So everyone becomes proud, they identify more forcibly with the body, and they lose their own souls in their quest for dominance. As it is seen, even from devotees, it is seen in our pursuit of maintaining or integrating to status quo, instead of like keeping our faith. There's a tendency to lose our soul in that quest. Just like one godbrother there, he wrote one poem I was sharing yesterday. He wrote one poem, godbrother. He said, are any of you feeling I'm just feeling disconnected from the rituals of Krishna consciousness. I'm finding no more taste in them. Can anyone else relate to this? Is it because I've committed offenses? Am I losing my taste? And so he was asking for different feedback why that is happening. He's also from New York City, so I hang out with him once a week usually. So I know how he lives. I know how I live also. So I was just like, do you think, our lack of taste in Krishna consciousness has anything to do with our pursuit of matter? We're losing our soul in the quest for matter. And in the pursuit of happiness, everyone thinks like this, to pursue happiness. In the pursuit of happiness, we lose our own souls and this mature energy. That is what the meaning of the word also, Ishare pe tastra viparyo shmriti. This verse, famous verse is there, Bhayam dutya abhinivesha tasha. When one turns away from God, Ishara Peta means to turn away from God. Now, you can't literally turn away from God because he's all pervading. So to be turned away from God means to be oblivious to him. Now, God is actually everywhere. How do you know God is everywhere? Because fundamentally, God is existence itself. And everything else that exists is because God has lended his own quality of sat. Satta. Satta means existence quality. He's lended his own existence quality to everything that exists. So wherever you find existence, God must be there. Like I always give the example these days now, when you have peanut oil, the peanut oil is coming from peanuts. So in all part of the peanut oil, you'll find peanutness is there. There cannot be peanut oil without the presence of peanutness, because peanut oil comes from peanuts. This is a very useful analogy to describe Satkaryavad philosophy, which is a little bit complicated. But this is an easily accessible analogy. So wherever you have a whole thing of peanut oil, it's not that most of the thing there's peanutness, but in this part there is no peanutness. No, everywhere it is there. So wherever you see any existence, God must be there, because it would have no basis for existence without God's presence, right? So therefore, Hiranyakashipu asked the question to Prahlad, is God in the pillar? Yeah, he also in the pillar. Why he not in the pillar? How is God in the pillar? Because the pillar exists. If God wasn't there, the pillar couldn't exist. So everywhere God is actually present. Therefore, you can never really turn away from God. So turning away from God means you're oblivious to him. So what is the effect of this obliviousness? It's called Bhagavad Vaimukya. Ishara pe tasha viparyo ashmriti. So the word ashmriti means you forget your own soul. To turn away from God is to turn away from your own soul. You lose your own soul also. And then viparyo. Viparyo means a reversal. So you are like a tiny unit of life, but now your identity is reversed and you identify with death. And you lose yourself in the death world. Everyone pursuing the death world, they lose themselves. So here, Indra is saying that this wealth is promoting this. Naturally, because wealth promotes the ego, which itself promotes identification with that viparya, with that reversal of life. And then if you get too much into it, asuram bhavam, you become like a demon. And you can't even respect your guru. That happens, like, to give another practical example in our own sanghas, you see this happen in another way. When people, they learn a new concept in Krishna consciousness, and they think that their guru doesn't know it. And then they say, well, they reject their guru. This happens all this time. It's common. People in Kali Yuga don't have that much loyalty. That's why the gurus can't chastise anymore. Previously, the gurus could chastise the disciple. Now, if the guru chastises the disciple starts her own movement, like Ritvik. He starts his own movement. The guru can't even chastise anymore. If the guru wants to give some feedback, he has to ask permission now from the disciple. Dear disciple, can I give some feedback to you? Yeah. With the folded palms, he has to ask for the feedback. There's another way. I've seen it so many times. You learn some new concept, you get some new information in Krishna consciousness. Then they reject their guru. Oh, my guru doesn't know this thing. So he is not guru. They reject him. So that is a suram bhava. You got a little bit of knowledge, a little bit extra knowledge, and you actually don't even know the accuracy of your knowledge. It's a new point you heard. You appreciate it, but you haven't really studied it in relationships as the complexity of the tapestry of Krishna consciousness. So you just know this little small part. You say, my guru doesn't know anything. So you become an asura, you become a demon. You just reject your guru, accept. So they're very dangerous thing, this mada. Okay, so last few verses here, two more. Someone may say to Indra in the assembly, you are in the highest post. So those, you are the king of heaven, you're in the highest post. So those who are in the highest post, they did not have to stand and honor the guru. So someone's, apparently from the commentaries, someone was giving advice to Indra like this. You're already in the highest post, no need for you to stand. So he's not agreeable to this. So he speaks this verse. Ya parameshtam dishanam adishtan na kanchana. Pradyutishtat iti bhuyor dharmante na paramam vidu. So if a person says, quote, one who is situated on an exalted throne of a king should not stand up to show respect to another king or brahmana. It is to be understood that he does not know the superior religious principles. Yaha, so one who parameshtam dishanam adishtan, one who is situated in the royal throne. Parameshtam means like the highest seat. It's usually a word that refers to Lord Brahma, who is parameshtam. He's situated in the highest seat in the universe. But here it refers to the royal throne. So for one who is situated on the royal throne, if someone says nakanchana pratyutishta, you don't have to rise for anyone because you're in the most exalted position. Then he says such persons do not know the param dharma. Dharmam te na param vidu. Param dharma here doesn't mean bhakti yoga, which is a phrase that is normally used to refer to bhakti yoga in the Bhagavatam. It means it doesn't know like a superior culture and how to. So in the Purport Prabhupada gives an example of Krishna himself, who's God. And when Narada came to the assembly at the Rajasuya Yagya, immediately he stood up along with all the other of his associates in high positions. Immediately, even though he's God, he honored Narada Muni, who was a Brahmana, who was a sage. And this is seen to be the culture everywhere. So if someone says like that, they are mistaken. They don't know the superior religious principles. So last verse here for this, and then we will give some conclusion. So Indra wants to chastise these people who speak like this, who giving this bad advice. So apparently someone was giving advice like that. Hey, Aribai, you are in the highest seat. There is no transgression. So he wants to chastise them. So he says here, Tesham kupata destrinam. Those who show the bad path. Kupata. This word kupata, you hear it like kuyogi, right? Kukata matigni. This very verse I like to quote from the third canto. Kukata. Kukata means the bad kata, which destroys the intelligence. Kukata matigni. Which is basically any topic that's not Christian. It's called kukata. Very popular these days. The kukata. So here, kupata. Kupata means the bad path. So those who show the bad path. Patatam tamasihyada. What is the bad path here? So the kupata drishtinam in context, the bad path is the suggestion that you don't have to honor your superior because of your position. You have some high position, you don't have to honor your superior. Oh, you have a little bit of new knowledge, you don't have to honor your guru now because you know better, you know best. But this is called as kupata drishtinam. They're showing you the bad path. So those who show the bad path, patatam tamasihyada, they fall down into darkness. And ye shraddha dyurvajastevai, those who put faith in the words of such people who are pointing out the kupata, you put faith in their words, then you also fall down with them. So majanti ashma plavaiva, he gives an example, like boarding a stone boat. So the stone boat is compared to the bad suggestions, bad knowledge, bad instructions from these people. They're saying you don't have to bow down. You're a great soul. You're better than everyone. So that is a stone boat. And then you take their advice. You have faith in their words, what they say. So you're stepping on the stone boat. So what happens? Stone boat sinks and you also sink. Finished. Prabhupada's translation is very nice because it's very heavy. he like spices it up, you know. Prabhupada's translation, he really wants us to get the point. So he like spices it up, put a little bit of, some extra salt in there, it's a little chili. But Prabhupada's translation here. Leaders who have fallen into ignorance or who mislead people by directing them to the path of destruction, as described in the previous verse. You don't have to honor your superiors, are in effect boarding a stone boat, and so too are those who blindly follow them. A stone boat would be unable to float and would sink in the water with its passengers. Similarly, those who mislead people go to hell, and their followers go with them. So this is more, again, another example of something that's more applicable now than ever before in certain ways. Prabhupada gives the example of like bogus gurus and yogis. And we may also add to the list, and Prabhupada will also speak of this. government officials and so on, politicians, Hollywood, musicians, they're all very popular because they have opulence. So the nature of having opulence is that you can inspire dedication. That is the nature of opulence. So therefore, when Krishna wants to speak the most confidential knowledge in Bhagavad Gita, he speaks about the Aishwarya of Bhagavan first. Why he speaks about Bhagavan's Aishwarya? Because only there you will become dedicated. No one ever becomes dedicated to someone who lacks Aishwarya. That's a fact. Even when you surrender to a sadhu, he doesn't have any wealth, but his Aishwarya is his knowledge and his sadhutva. And that sadhutva inspires you to surrender. That is Aishwarya, there's an opulence, their renunciation, their knowledge. So no one has ever surrendered to a person who doesn't have Aishwarya. That's a fact. But the Aishwarya in the sadhu is categorically different than the Aishwarya of the gunas of nature. So in the material world, these Hollywood stars, influencers, politicians, so they have a lot of Aishwarya in terms of the gunas of Prakriti. So they're able to inspire surrender. How come, this is not political, but it's just a very good example. When the president election was going on in the United States, so Joe Biden was there, he interviewed Cardi B. No, he had Cardi B performing. You know Cardi B? Yeah, we know who is Cardi B. You don't know Cardi B. So Cardi B she's an artist now, a musician. But professionally, before she was a musician, she was a professional stripper. She was a stripper. Very popular stripper, super ignorant as they can come in terms of like her public persona is like very wild and ignorant. So it's kind of hilarious. So she became very popular. Then she became a musician. She wrote I can't even tell you the name of the song that she wrote. They went popular. She performed at the Grammys. I can't even mention it. It would be inappropriate in the Bhagavatam class. That it was literally that inappropriate. I can't mention the name. And during the president election, Joe Biden had Cardi B interview him. Now she's a completely ignorant person. She doesn't know anything. Like I'm sure many of you are gonna look up Cardi B real quick. You go see any video, fully ignorant person, you know? She's a little bit funny because she's very unhinged and kind of like what you see is what you get. So that's kind of a attractive quality. But like very ignorant person. He had her conduct an interview for the president election. So why? Why have her conduct? Because she had 22 million followers on her social media. On one media, 22 million followers, on another media, 100 plus million followers. So whatever she says, her followers will listen to her. So in this way, you know, they take advantage. It's very interesting. But all these people, they are kupata drishtina. They're pointing people in the wrong direction. They are ignorance. So they themselves will sink, and anyone who follows them, they also will go down. So you should not follow these people. So anyway, so therefore, Indra decides that he will now offer obeisance to his guru. This is the last verse. With great frankness and without duplicity, I shall now bow my head at the lotus feet of Brihaspati, the spiritual master. Because he is in the mode of goodness, he is fully aware of all knowledge and is the best of brahmanas. Now I shall touch his lotus feet and offer my obeisances unto him to try to satisfy him. So this is he comes to some solution. That's what he's telling the assembly. If I don't know, in the Bhagavatam, wealth is mentioned as a very big obstacle in many places in the Bhagavatam. But one of the most outstanding places that it comes is in the 88th chapter of the 10th canto, where Yudhishthira Maharaj is bewildered how Lord Narayana is a husband of the goddess Lakshmi, but all his devotees are poor in this world, largely speaking. Not all of them, because the great kings, the devoted kings, they have, but most of the time they're like that. Whereas those who are devoted to Shiva, even though Shiva lives underneath a tree, all his followers are having a lot of wealth. So it seems like this is not just a modern thing, but it was also an ancient thing. That Krishna's devotees, for the most part, are seen to be broke. So why this thing is there? So in short, Krishna gives me an answer. He says, well, Shiva is the husband of goddess Durga. Durga is the personified form of the material energy composed of 3 gunas. So the wealth of Shiva Bhaktas is the wealth in terms of the 3 gunas of Prakriti. And he says these 3 gunas, the word guna means rope, right? So their wealth is a rope that binds them. So is that really the wealth? Whereas the wealth that comes from the Lord is nirguna. He uses the word specifically. Nirguna means beyond the gunas. So their wealth may not be visible in terms of the gunas of Prakriti, but they have another wealth that is nirguna, that is invisible to the eyes of the gunas. And then Krishna goes and says the most extraordinary verse, which is a little bit of a disturbance to the devotee community. He says that when I show my anugraha, my mercy to the devotees, then gradually I take away their opulence. He used the word dhanam actually, which literally means wealth. Harisheta dhanam shana. If you read Prabhupada Linamrita, how many of you have read Prabhupada Linamrita? You read it. So whenever Prabhupada would get into some reversal in life, he would quote this verse, at least as it's presented in Linamrita. Anytime there was any trouble or reversal in life, he would, the Linamrita was described, he would laugh and say, Yasyaha Nigrenami, Harisheta dhanam shana. His marriage was falling apart. His business was falling apart. He would laugh. This verse was quoted a lot by Prabhupada, it seems, when he was dealing with processing reversals of life. When the Lord shows his mercy, he removes the wealth. That's what it says. And then what happens when the wealth is removed? That your relationships that are based on material facilities, they reject you. So Chris does the next part. Now, oh, you don't have any more wealth? I want a divorce. They reject you. Your friends don't call you anymore, whatever. And then you're given completely to the mercy of the Lord. So the next verses, which are often not quoted in this passage, is that the Lord sends sadhus. And now because you've been humbled by your position, you're able to be fully receptive to their messages. And that way you become a devotee. For this reason, it's called as God's grace. That doesn't mean wealth. So the word, we mentioned this verse, akinchana gochara, in the beginning of the class. So akinchana means one who is without the material possessions. But the word akinchana can also be translated, and it is sometimes translated this way, one who is not possessed by the material things. So devotees favor that translation more for reasons that may be obvious. So you can have things, you should not be possessed by them though. That is okay. So in our philosophy also, we often like to quote the Yuta Vairagya principle in this regard. Yuta Vairagya. So that means you renounce through engaging the thing in the proper way in service to Krishna. But the first qualification for that is anasaktasha vishaya. Anasaktasha vishaya means you're not attached to the object, which is a pretty big qualification or qualifier for that, Yuta Vairagya. In any case, whether you say no wealth or not possessed by wealth, the idea is that the wealth is generally considered as an obstacle to bhajan. So one has to be thoughtful how they engage with Krishna's energies. Now for the devotee, nirbandha Krishna sambandhe. He's supposed to have the vision that everything in the world is actually paraphernalia for Krishna's seva. So if you hold that vision in your heart, then you can engage with anything without being entangled in it. So that is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta or Srila Prabhupada driving a what do they call it, Royal Royce car, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sannyasi wearing the fancy trench coat and turban for the services of Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very dynamic preacher, but he was anasaktasha vishna. He was able to also sit and chant 1 billion names of the Lord. It took him 9 years to do it. So you could do that. You can also do the other thing. But if you can't do this thing, you might want to be careful with this other one. One of the obstacles in sadhana bhakti is known as, what is that? The sixth bhajana kriya, taranga rangini. Taranga rangini means riding the waves of bhakti. So bhakti, very powerful energy. The more bhakti that comes in you, the more you attract opulence. You attract worship, you attract opulence, you attract appreciation. And a sadhaka who's not very skillful, he may be like, Taranga rangini means riding the waves. So it's like, I always picture like, he's getting the accolades and so on like a surfboard. He's like, having a good time. Until he crashes into the pools of material waters. because he's not skillful enough to handle that. It's considered one of the obstacles to bhakti. And in our own sanghas, we've definitely seen that obstacle manifest in unambiguous ways. So to help us deal with it with a little bit more wisdom. In any case, this passage, like many passages that come in the Bhagavatam, we'll hear it again very soon in Vichasura Lila, presents wealth as a particular issue for the sadhaka. So one has to be careful about that and pray for Krishna's mercy. Okay, so we'll stop here. We finished the passage for today. See if there are any questions or comments. Srila Damodar Maharaj is sitting here, and so we're feeling a little uncomfortable and comfortable. Maybe Maharaj wants to say something first.
I'll ask a question. I think we say that there's one worship in Aishwarya, which is like kind of majesty,
Right.
and that's Narayana. And then there's one worship in Madhurya, that's Krishna.
Right.
But can we say that Krishna doesn't have Aishwarya?
No. Yeah. Maharaj is saying that we usually say one type of worship is an Aishwarya, like the forms of Narayana, etc., majesty. And another form of worship is like sweetness, Madhurya worship, that is Krishna. So can we say Krishna doesn't have any Aishwarya? We just studied one, Ragvartma Chandrika, about a month ago, we were studying. And the whole second part of the Ragvartma Chandrika is this particular topic. And Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur clearly says there that it is Madhurya because it is grounded on Aishwarya. In other words, if Krishna didn't have any Aishwarya, he would be non-different from any mundane human that you would also appreciate because you have some sort of sweet relationship with him. The fact he said it is Madhurya because Krishna has Aishwarya, but he acts like a child or like a beloved or like a friend, despite his Aishwarya. And some verses quoted from the Durvas Muni Lila, where Durvas Muni goes to Narayana to be saved from the chakras. You wonder how the chakra never caught him. He just put just a little pressure, so he'll come to his senses. And then Narayana speaks to Durvas Muni, one of the verses, the second one. He says that without my devotees, I don't care for my Aishwarya. So that means his Aishwarya is there, but he relates as a beloved or as a friend or as a intimate son because of his love or because of their love. Actually, he presents that. So it's Madhurya because there's Aishwarya and not in spite of the Aishwarya. So you have to know Aishwarya. There can be no Madhurya Lila without Aishwarya. That's his basic point there. And so, yeah, that's my basic understanding there. Like I said earlier, no one becomes dedicated to a person devoid of Aishwarya. That is not possible. That's why when Krishna opens up even the talk on Vibhuti Yoga, chapter 10, he opens up again with his Aishwarya. And then he says, by understanding my Aishwarya, my Vibhutis, you will become dedicated to me in pure devotion. So without Aishwarya, you will not become dedicated to anyone. That is a fact. You can see many people on the street that have no Aishwarya, no beauty, no knowledge, no sadhutva. You don't become dedicated to them. Actually, you get away from me, disturbance. So only Aishwarya inspires the dedication. So, but even though Krishna has so much Aishwarya, that's not the important part for the Braja devotees. That doesn't mean they don't notice it, but it is not the important part. So sometimes when Krishna's coming home from the forest, all the devatas there are worshiping. And all the friends can see the devatas are worshiping Krishna. They're like, it is so nice that my friend is being worshipped like God. Then the cowboys, they go home and tell their parents, hey, Krishna was worshipped by the devatas. And they say, oh, it is so nice that my son is God. Not that God has become my son, but that my son is God. They think in this way. Or the gopis think, oh, how wonderful, our beloved is worshipped like God. So they see the opulence, but it's not important for them. But it has to be opulence, otherwise you can't be God.
They give the analogy of the milk that's overboiling.
No, I don't know that one. The milk.
He gave the analogy that I've seen this in India because they didn't have gas stoves. So when you cook milk, it'll overboil.
Right.
There's no way to turn down the heat.
The heat, right.
So you throw straw in it. And then it doesn't overboard.
Oh, right.
But then the straw kind of, it disappears
Right.
and just comes up slightly.
Right.
So
Right.
that's described as Krishna's opulence.
Right.
It's kind of just comes occasionally to the surface because it seems that it's kind of somewhat required.
Yeah.
For the love.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that analogy was given, and I had forgotten about that. Okay, Mukunda, you have something it says here.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Yeah, so this stone boat analogy that was coming up. One I'm watching that Netflix documentary, Wild Wild Country. Osho.
Osho. Yeah, I heard about
that. I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but one of the most disturbing things for me watching that is like a lot of his disciples are glorifying him, and if you didn't have the context of who they were talking about, you could swap it with like Prabhupada memories and it would sound the same, like the way that the Prabhupada's disciples glorify him.
Sure.
Which is very disturbing in a way, because it's like these people are bamboozled by someone who's completely illegitimate, but they speak in the same way.
Right.
And I was also thinking of, what to speak of our generation of devotees who have followed some Prabhupada disciples who fell away. And it's like, what I'm thinking is that they boarded what seemed to be a strong boat, right? A legitimate boat, but then like somewhere along the journey, it turned to stone, and then they sink along with the leader. And so I'm just wondering, like, what is the fate of like kind of almost like seems like an innocent follower there. They're kind of being thrown in with this stone boat, but almost against their will sometimes, it seems like. So just wonder if you could comment on that.
It's a little touchy subject matter. My way of commenting on this, I mean, Maharaj would have some different insight, but my way of commenting on this is that Prabhupada would often speak of cheaters and cheated, and people want to be cheated, so they get cheating gurus. And the bona fide guru, he generates faith. So the faith for Gaudiya Vaishnavas is faith in Shastra Praman, fundamentally. So Prabhupada writes this. I often like to quote this particular statement of Prabhupada in the Madhya Lila, chapter 20, verse 352. He says that Shastra, Sadhu Guru Shastra Bhakya Chetete Kariya Aikya. And Narottam Das Thakur Bhajan, where he says, as devotees, they put faith in Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru. Aikya means like with exclusive focus. But then Prabhupada goes on to say, but he says Shastra is the center for both, the Sadhu and the Guru. And he says, unless a Guru speaks according to Shastra, he is not a Guru. And if the Sadhu doesn't speak according to Shastra, he is not a Sadhu. And therefore, he says, unfortunately, these days, people do not refer to the Shastras. So, my kind of understanding may be a little bit limited, but the gurus and the sadhus, they point us to Krishna's guidance. They're representing Krishna after all. And they point us to his guidance in the statements of Shastra. And that way, it's not about them and what they're saying, but rather what Krishna is saying. Many times, Prabhupada would be questioning why he is calling people fools, rascals, this, that, and the other. And Prabhupada said, I am not saying, Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita. Then you call it shloka. When Prabhupada would give classes, his standard was to make some statement and quote some shloka from Bhagavatam. Even if you read his purports. So many of us are not so scholarly, we don't have good memories. But if you read his purports, most of his purports are just Bhagavatam shlokas. And if you know Bhagavatam very well, I don't know Bhagavatam very well, but I have a good memory. Many times I can say, oh, this is this shloka, all this. His whole purport would just be shlokas, but he doesn't put the shloka, he's just writing a purport. And so Guru fundamentally is one who gives faith and what Krishna is teaching. Shastra Praman, that is a fundamental faith that holds the sadhaka through and through. And a lot of times, this is just my observation, and this may not be nuanced enough, but I notice it even like being in the Bhakti Center. People put faith in the person, they just say for granted they must be speaking from some bona fide source. And they just put faith in the person without knowing anything about the Shastra. So like in Bhakti Center, for example, people put faith in my guru because he is very wonderful also and very kind, easy to relate to. So people start practicing because of the faith, and that is also very good. But then I've seen the same people make offense to other Vaishnavas who speak from the Bhagavatam, and they just weren't aware that these sort of teachings are also coming in the Bhagavatam. Like a Jaya Swami, it was a good example. He would come to Bhakti Center, we'd let him speak. And he speaks, Maharaj could be a little bit strong on occasion or most of the time. And so these new people come to the Jaya Maharaj class thinking Bhakti is just love and compassion, whatever. I mean, it's not that they don't have a point, but they don't really understand the depth of those words. So they hear Jaya Maharaj, who's also teaching love and compassion, but the Bhagavatam style. Dharma, Projita, Kaita, Vatra, Paramorna, Masaranam. Bhagavatam will kick out forcibly anything that is Kaitava Dharma. So what does that mean? The Bhagavatam kicks out Kaitava? It means they criticize that which is not Shuddha Bhakti and in terms that are not at all ambiguous. It's just like very clear. So Jayadeva Maharaj's presentation is a little bit straightforward. Even for me, sometimes I'm just like, you get nervous. You're like, man, that's too heavy, Maharaj. You soften the blow a little bit. And then they hear this thing. They don't know it's coming from Shastra. So they reject. It makes some offense to Jayadvaita Swami because they think he is not speaking something that is Ashara. Why is he making that? Because I have faith in what Radha Maharaj says. Okay, that is very good also. But what he says is coming from Shastra. So you have to be able to make that connection. Otherwise, it does turn into just like a personality cult thing, which is also in some ways, that is part of the philosophy, actually. I don't think, personality cult does get like a bad rap, but I think that there's something to it that's not negative. That's very important. In a lot of ways, if you're a follower, for us who are followers of Prabhupada, people see us like a personality cult because we're really into Prabhupada. But there's something very powerful about that also. But Prabhupada also wanted us to represent the ideas of Srimad Bhagavatam. In his prayer, the prayer where he's coming to America, Markande Bhagavad Dharma, one poem he writes as he's arriving on the Boston shore. Very beautiful poem. I read it. I always read that poem on Prabhupada's disappearance day. And I always cry at the end of it because it's so touching. That's the one way that Krishna, make me dance. I'm a puppet in your hands. Make me dance, make me dance, make me dance. So in that whole prayer, he says, my whole purpose in coming to America is to distribute Srimad Bhagavatam. Is that I want people to understand the concepts of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I always take that as an example. If we want to serve Prabhupada's mission, then we have to distribute Bhagavatam, not only the actual book, but distribute the conceptions of Srimad Bhagavatam into the hearts of those who come in touch with us. So that way, when people start putting like unrealistic faith in just you, it happens to me also, because I'm charismatic, I'm articulate, I'm a little bit funny, and I'm relatable. So many times it happens to me. People are like, can you be my guru? I've been asked a few times like that. Can you guide me? I'm like, let me show you my history from 1 hour ago on the internet. So first of all, you need a realistic estimation of who I am. And if you see my history and you still want to be my disciple, then we can have a conversation about it. They see that history like, oh man, okay, you're like fully human. So, but they get impressed because I'm a little articulate. And so when I see them putting like, that sort of confidence in me, that is not a bad thing necessarily. Everyone needs some shelter. But then I make sure that I point them in the direction of scripture and how sadhus comment on scripture. And don't just put faith in what I'm saying just because you find me funny or whatever. Throw their attention to Srimad Bhagavatam. That way, if anything happens to me, which is highly likely, it could happen today or tomorrow. People a lot more powerful than me got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And I'm letting people know ahead of time, I like cookies. So if you see me going for a cookie, don't judge me because I already told you ahead of time that I like cookies. I'm very clear I like cookies. So if something happens to me because I was directing their attention to the shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, and their faith is in that, even if their faith is in that through me as some sort of instrument, but it's in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's in Krishna, then they don't become lost when there's some problem that comes up with me. And so my meditations thinking about this over the years is that one of the main responsibilities of a guru or a teacher is to make sure people's faith is really solidly grounded in scripture. And naturally, because of that, you also get grounded in the sadhus who comment on scripture, what they are saying, what you want to hear from them, how they comment on Srimad Bhagavatam, how they express the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. You get nice fixed faith in them also. But with people like Osho and these other bogus gurus, they just present their own ideas and they're charismatic. So people put faith in them. But because they are not, or they may not be fully enlightened, then when they get caught with their head in the cookie jar, then the repercussions are devastating for the whole community. Whereas I feel like it would be less devastating. It would still hurt a lot, but it would be less devastating if people's faith was grounded in Bhagavatam. You know, and now they're just like, yeah, whatever my guru says, and you don't know what is his position and so on. We feel safe with Prabhupada because he already did his Leela. And one thing that's very special about Prabhupada is that none of his disciples have ever come forward with any discrepancies in him. Maybe they didn't like how heavy he was, but you never hear about any molestation, nothing like that. All these there's so many big gurus, and Vrindavan also so many big gurus. After they've departed, so many things are coming out about them. I don't want to name the names, but like a lot of big names, not only Osho, many big names in the Ashtanga yoga community also. All these big gurus, they come out and suddenly the disciples are coming forward. He molested me, he did this, he did that, another thing. Nothing like that has ever come out from Prabhupada. That's how pure he was. And that's an extraordinary accomplishment. That's actually I was talking about this with some devotees in Vrindavan. It's extraordinary because hardly anyone can accomplish that successfully. So he's already performed his Leela, so it's easy for us to put that trust in Prabhupada. Then when it comes to the contemporary gurus, you may or may not have that trust because there's good reasons why you may not trust also, especially because of the various history. So I feel like in order to navigate this sort of turmoil, we have to be clear that a teacher's responsibility to the student is to ground their faith in Srimad Bhagavatam. I mean, that's our philosophy. You know, our Shraddha means Shastriya Shraddha fundamentally. And unless you get the rock mark thing, then, you know, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has called it as Loba Maya Shraddha, where you have faith that is inspired by greed for a Braja Bhav. But basically grounded in scripture. Scripture for us means Bhagavatam. So I feel like it will pinch a little bit less. I know devotees whose gurus have left, but they had a lot of faith in Srimad Bhagavatam. They had a lot of faith in Prabhupada. They weren't lost just because their gurus left or has some difficulty. So that's the only thing I can give right now for that. But it is interesting to see how people talk about their gurus, and it sounds like they're talking about Prabhupada if you didn't know the full context. Then you might start thinking to yourself, am I being tricked? Am I being deluded? You know, so then you don't have to worry about that if your guru is telling you, what does Srimad Bhagavatam say? There's like when Prabhupada, sometimes the disciples would give class in front of Prabhupada also. And they would, you know, be speaking and Prabhupada would tell them, quote Bhagavatam. You couldn't just like tell stories and things like that. You have to quote Shastra. Somehow now what I'm about to say is my own personal hang up. So you can take this or leave this one. But like, especially when I'm in Vrindavan, devotees, they come, when they get Bhagavatam class, sometimes I've seen it where they only tell Prabhupada stories. Only. They read the verse, they read the purport, and they close the book, and then they go into Prabhupada stories. Which is okay. Like if this was like a Sangha where we just want to hear about Prabhupada stories, but we want to hear about what Prabhupada taught. Quote Srimad Bhagavatam, because that was just when Prabhupada was on the planet, he would make y'all do that. So you should, you know, do it for us also to show us what is the standard of presentation. And then you want to tell us stories. Then you just encourage that sort of personality thing where it will be in Prabhupada, of course. That is very good because Prabhupada already has successful Leela. But they'll also transfer that to some other person who may not be so qualified. Then you get in trouble. So teach us Bhagavatam, quote Bhagavatam, show us what is the standard, you know. So that, again, that's my little hang up with that sort of thing. But I feel like that gives a sort of protection to devotees. So they can feel confident that they're not being cheated. So Bhagavatam says that you accept or reject, that's on you. I'm not saying, Prabhupada would say, I'm not saying Bhagavad Gita is saying, Srimad Bhagavatam is saying. Another example of this is when the whole moon landing thing happened. The moon landing. So Prabhupada said it was fake. Then devotees got real bewildered about that. So then if you read Prabhupada's purports, because sometimes in his purports early on, he says fake. And y'all know how I feel about it. It's 100% fake, no doubt about it. Their spaceship looks like my tent when I was 5 years old. But in any case, Prabhupada's argument for that and his purports, if you go and read it in 5th canto, his argument was that Shastra is telling this. That was his main argument. He said, how can you believe they went to the moon when Shastra tells this? His main argument was that don't take it because I'm saying it, that it's fake, but take it because Shastra is telling it. So and that's why you all know, most of you have been hearing me for a while. So that's my core conviction is like this, how to protect ourselves. And of course, the other factor is inquiry. So I noticed with a lot of these groups, like Osho's group, and even in our own sanghas, is people don't have any questions. So if you don't ask questions, that's how you can be cheated. You have to bring your question to the table of spiritual dialectic. The whole presentation of scripture is a dialectic between an adept and a person who's seriously investigating the subject matter, right? Every shastra begins with a question. Have you noticed that? Bhagavatam begins with a question. Bhagavad Gita begins with a question. All the Upanishads, they begin with questions. So that is the most important dynamic in the dialectic that goes on between you and a teacher. Now I notice no one has any questions anymore. So that allows them to be easily duped by some charismatic person. You have to bring if you have questions, you have doubts that need to be settled and resolved. So you want to just accept anything and everything because the inquiry, in a sense, gives a certain protection also. So that's the other element that I see a lot of groups suffer from. And the guy is just really good at kirtan, rock and roll, kirtan, and whatever. That's my guru. Okay, you might get lucky, you got to actually like a bona fide teacher. It's quite possible. Anything is possible. But you could also be putting yourself in a dangerous situation. You got a good guru, and then he wants to give you the touch of prema. Yeah, there one guru, I'm not going to tell who, I don't want to say the names because that's inauspicious, but in one guru, they're very popular in Braj. And he left the body, came out, that a lot of his woman disciples was talking about he was given the touch of prema. So you were like, oh, that sounds ridiculous to us now, but they were believing at the time. Why do you believe this? Touch of prema. I would have a lot of questions. If I was ladies, like, I want to give you the touch of prema. I was like, okay, before you give me the touch of prema, I got some questions for you. But where in the Shastra is the touch of prema coming out? Can you point out where the touch of prema, how the gurus give the touch of prema? Then you will be protected from this sort of cheating. So bring your questions to the spiritual dynamic. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I know it's there's one other thing here, but I have to stop here. It's already 8:30. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. See you all soon. Srila Prabhupada. See you tomorrow. Hari Hari.